Hello, it's Gadget UK here again. This time we're building an IDE 68K, I think it is. If we just get the components out of here. The chip is in the chip carrier there, so that was kindly packaged up. And all of this was sent from one of my friends on Discord, actually, Sparks UK, one of my patrons. So we've got everything here, all of the little resistors and LEDs, regulator and stuff, some caps, the pins there for this. That will become clear in a minute when I show you the PCB and stuff and explain a little bit how this works. So here's the PCB. If I just flip this around, yeah, IDE 68K 429, and in brackets says 426A, that might be the revision or something. And you can see it says 68,000 there. This is designed to fit into an Amiga, into the CPU socket, and then on top of it you could fit a RAM expansion, something like the Live 2, you know, gotta go faster RAM board, or just the CPU, and then obviously the CPU goes on top of that. So yeah, you can have like a little tower of upgrades there, this providing IDE, and you can see it's got position here for the IDE IDC connector. So we've got that here. It's the larger standard type that you get on lots of old PC motherboards and stuff. So that's going to fit that way up. Yeah, I spoke to Live 2 about this actually in advance, and he was saying the CPLD goes on the underside. Now the interesting thing is, I noticed there's a point here for the LED, but there's also one on this side, so you do need to make sure you mount the LED on the side opposite the CPLD. So the CPLD is a Xilinx, it says on there 9572 TQ100. That's not the exact part I've got here actually, so this must be an equivalent or something. Yeah, it's a different part number that, but I'm assured that that should work with this. So just like the terrible fireboards, we should be able to program this up using the JTAG programmer I've got. I'm just trying to see where the programming points are. They're up here. So we need to stick a pin header up here. You've got CMS, TDI, TDO, TCK, ground, VCC. Yeah, so it should be pretty straightforward because there's not a huge amount of components. The first thing I'm going to start with is this chip actually, and then we'll get the small components on. There's not very many, maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9, and then we need to get the socket on. Now this isn't the socket that came with this. I think he sent me one of the ones that sits like that on the board, and that's what I'm going to go with, because the way this mounts, as I say, this goes on the underside. It's going to fit into the CPU socket on a 500. It's going to be on the left hand side. The edge of the case is like here somewhere. So if this was facing out the left hand side like that, it's going to be really difficult connecting IDE and things. You know, you probably could plug a cable in there and wrap it up over the top, but whatever you put in there is going to be coming out this way. Here you want the card on this side, so it makes sense to have it upright. Of course you can't put it that way because it'll obviously block the CPU socket there, so I'm going to go put that one away. This is what I was using on the TF530 builds actually, this type of adapter. And he amazingly included a full tube of Chipquik NC191 smooth flow, no clean tack flux. That is brilliant, and some little nozzles and everything, so very, very, very much appreciated, just at a time when actually I've run out of flux. So yeah, that's going to be super useful. Now I did say I would talk about this in a minute, and here we are, these pins. These are really hard to find actually, and I think you've got to buy them from AliExpress. There's nowhere else seems to sell them. None of them, like DigiKey, you know, Mouse, RS, Farnell, none of them seem to stock this, as far as I can see. I think it was Live 2 that found them on AliExpress and then let everybody know. So you can see it fits nicely through the hole there. It's a perfect fit. Now the difficulty with this, obviously you've got 64 of these to mount here, and you need them to be super, super straight. Any deviation in angle could make this very hard to get in and out of the board, and also, you know, it's about getting pins into the top as well. It's got to be dead straight. It's probably best to solder it from the underside here. That might seem counterintuitive, but if you look at the top here, there's very little to solder onto. You know, once it's on the pad, there's little around, you know, clearance around it, whereas on this side here, it's a little bit thinner where it comes out, and there's quite a lot to solder onto around there. So I think what I will do is fit all the pins, get a turn pin socket plugged into them all to hold them in place, flip it upside down, and then solder each of these pins, but we'll do that after we've got the CPLD on, and the smaller components. Wait till the board's complete. So I haven't even really got going yet, and I've hit my first problem already, which is an interesting one. This PCB kind of lends itself to hot air, because the solder on all of the pads there, just a little bit, you might be able to see it on some of these pads here. You know, the solder coated, but it's quite a thick, it doesn't feel like that here, but it's quite a thick bumpy layer. So when you try and get the chip on, it's kind of wanting to go in between the pins. It won't sit on there because the solder on here. So the first thing I'm going to have to do, I think, I mean, obviously you could just try and sit it on there straight and use hot air and fit it that way and then reflow things, but you know what, I think that's going to get messy really quickly. The alignment might not be as good as I want either, so I'm going to get a little bit of flux on there, some desolder braid, and go over those pads and then get the chip into position and anchor it in a couple of points, just the same way you've seen me do on all the TF builds. Of course, the less time you heat pads that small, the better. So that is sitting on the pads way better, actually. It didn't take too long to line that. I'm probably going to knock it out now when I try and anchor it. The problem is here, the pads are so blooming small. Let me just rotate it a little bit without nudging it. Yeah, the pads are so small. This is not going to be easy. So we'll just add copious amounts of solder. There we go, I think I got it. Yeah, that's one. And then we'll do the same thing over here again, just try and get near it. Trying to get onto it is probably impossible. And copious amounts of solder, there we go. And just hold it down. Reflow. Get rid of the solder. And so you can't see from my finger, hold it down. Flow. There we go, that's anchored on. I just need to inspect that now to make sure it's totally straight, which I think it is. Get some flux around it and do a little bit of drag soldering. For that I'm going to use the Antex. So you're on macro there, so you can see the alignment is very good. If you look at the pins on the side there, yeah, there's going to be no problem with mounting of that, same down there. So you can see the dot here in the left hand corner, that's pin 1, and there's a little slice, and it matches on the silk screen. I didn't show you that, that's how you get pin 1. So I'm not onto the new flux yet, I've just got a little bit in a few of these tubes here to use up. So that's what I'm going to go with just for now. Just carefully get that around there. You have to be careful when you're using a tube like this, or any kind of applicator really, not to rub against the pins and bend the pins, you know, out of position. I'll need to finish this with some magnification in a minute, but I can show you some of this. So if we just get a little bit of solder onto the tip here, I'm trying to remember which side ones I did. I think I did outer edges, didn't I? So if we start on this side here, and yeah, we'll just get a little bit of solder there and just have a drag along like that. Yeah, got some bridges there because the pitch is very fine, and obviously got a bit too much solder. But anyway, you get the idea. You can see that is one side done with a blob that needs removing with some braid. So I'm attempting to try and show you some of this on macro, so let's just have a little drag along here. As I get near the end, I'm stopped. Remove the solder from the tip because we've already got quite a lot there, and then just continue and bob in and out, and you might be able to get rid of the excess. Yeah, hopefully you can see that isn't bad. I need to use magnification again to perfect that, but if I just move this into shot a little bit, you might be able to see that's not too bad. If you look at the other sides, yeah, they're not too bad. There's a blob of solder on that one there, on the left side needs removing, but we're nearly there. So that wasn't too bad at all, actually. We'll just start to clean the flux off here. You could argue wait till the end, but I'm going to be soldering some of these little components here. It looks like there might be a join there still. I need to check that with magnification. Sometimes the flux will obscure things and you can't really see what's going on. That's another reason to clean up at this stage. but also handling the board, while I'm handling it to fit all the smaller ones, which there are not that many of, I'll just end up getting flux all over my hands and it'll just become a mess really quickly. So the final component before all the pins and the IDE connector, here's our LED. Now you can test LEDs, hang on, let's put that down, in diode test on your multimeter, and if I just put this down, you'll see there's a green, you might not be able to tell from there, there's a green triangle pointing to the right hand side up here, and that indicates, hang on a sec, I'm going to be careful because I'll lose this, that indicates the negative, the arrow. If I measure on the top side here, can you see it illuminating? Yeah? I don't think you can see that green dot. So the negative is where the arrow goes to, and it's also got a green blob here on that side on this particular LED, so I know that that's negative. Just tested on the PCB, and the positive is this edge here, which is marked correctly, so I just need to sit it with the negative up here. So I've spent about 45 minutes messing around with these wonderful pins. I can't thank Sparks enough for sending me these. These are amazingly easy to assemble. So what I've been doing here, as you can see, I've mounted one side entirely. One or two of them might need tweaking a little bit, and the way I did this is I soldered one to start with, made sure it was, I did it from this side here, the solder points on this side of the board here. Don't even attempt to solder on that side, it's a fruitless exercise, I think. You could do to make sure the double's secure, but anyway, you can see if I just feed them all through the holes here, and then fit turn pin on top here, this way. If you do it the other way, they don't, the pins don't go all the way into the turn pin. They're longer. These are actually longer than the turn pin. So you have to do it this way around. But nevertheless, if I just fill every hole with a pin, well, I'll tell you what, I've got a whole new level of respect for Liv 2, actually, the Gotta Go Faster on board that you built and sent me. The time taken to build, obviously the few boards he'll have built himself, and ones he'll have given to other friends and things, and then the one he built for me. These are super time consuming. You've got to have a lot of patience to assemble them. For you, right, that's all the pins in. So now comes the difficult part of trying to not move anything and get a piece of turn pin into the whole lot. I can't see what I'm doing here. Yeah, this is easier said than done. Is it going in? It's going in on one side, not so much on the other. Oh, it's going in. Oh, there we are. Yeah, so look at that pin there. Can you see that one's bent? This is the thing, so before you commit to soldering them, certainly inspect ones that are crazily out of position like that one. I must have done that, I don't remember that going in like that. Just try and straighten it up somewhat. I can also see why Liv 2 kindly provided me some spares of these, not very many, just not enough to do this, but there were enough that should I ever break a few, I've got some spares. That was very good of him. And it's the same with Sparks, he sent me extra ones here, I've got, I don't know, about 20 left there. So yeah, so once you get to that point, now just start to solder them. Do them one at a time, but as you solder it, do make sure it's straight. If it's not, heat it and just move it a little bit, and then move on to the next one. It's a case of heat the pin and the pad, push the solder into the actual fat part of the pin there you go, until it flows all the way around it. Sometimes it takes a while to heat the pin, hang on. But I would stop periodically and just make sure they're straight. And that you've got enough solder on there. So then the next thing I'm doing here, and I won't commit to pushing this in at this point, is just to sit it on the socket like that. So the alignment looks good. I've inspected right down and I can see the pins are sat into every single hole of that socket. So if I forced that on, I would get it on there, but then it would be really hard to get off. So I am not going to do that at this stage. I'm just going to carefully back out. That bit's done. We'll just need to get the IDE connector on here, obviously pull this socket off, and then go and test it on a motherboard, because when the socket is on a when this is soldered on a motherboard, it's much easier to get it out without the socket warping. If you stick a socket on here, you'll see it with this one now, I can sort of show you that. It's like, how do you get this off? Well, you've got to sort of start to prise here, and of course, it's very difficult. As you can see, it's hardly moving, and you start to warp and damage the socket. See what I mean? So then you've got to start trying to prise it at individual points like this here, all the way along, a little bit at a time, without damaging the board or the socket. It takes ages to get it off. So the final part is to get the IDC connector on. Pin 1's up here, there's a little arrow, and pin 1 is marked on the board there. But as you can see, it's super tight. I've got to hope it doesn't push the pins through here. You know, the holes that have been drilled at manufacture are very, very small there. Let's just try and ease it on. Doesn't really want to go through. Yeah, they're starting to come through there. Just need to make sure they are all through. Well, look, we've bent a pin already. This is one of the things. These are very delicate. And finally, we are done. I added 2 jumpers there for INT, 2 and OVR. Those are needed. You need to connect those to somewhere on the 500 or the 2000 in order for this to work. I think that's it. It's worth pointing out, as I mentioned before with an annotation, I programmed this up at the point just before we soldered these things on. It's always a good idea to do that, because if you need to do rework on this, it's obviously going to be very fiddly once you've got the pins on. So I did program the firmware up already. Yeah, there's some bent pins over here, look. They feel really out in this position here. It's probably a good idea just to go over with some pliers like this, and then just inspect in the other orientation to make sure they're all straight. But we'll have a go at fitting this into the 500 Plus. Now the 500 Plus has already got wires on for the INT and OVR signals, because I've built a TF530. You've not seen that yet. There's a bit of solder on there, I can feel it, just on one pin there. It's just a little bit. That's one thing that can be a problem. Yeah, it's gone now. Anyway, let's go and give it a try. So just testing the 500 Plus still works, and it does, as you can see. So I'll switch that off. So you can see the wires here for INT2 and OVR. This socket needs replacing. That'll be another video, because it's had pins like this in it, which means it's super loose now. So I'm not bothered about sticking this in here because it's already loose, and we'll be redoing it. And it might just help with these pins, because sticking these straight into a turn pin socket as they are at the moment could be quite difficult. So let's try and get this pin here aligned and just inspect on the side over here to make sure they're all okay, and then press it in. You can see that it went in really easy because that socket is so bad. So if we just get this back in here. Oh no, that's a pain. That in an OVR thing, it's right there. Why would they put it there? That's stupid. I think the idea is they expect you to solder wires. What I'll have to do is pull this off, solder it on the underside pointing out this way. Oh, that has really annoyed me. Right, take 2, they're soldered on the underside of there now. Hopefully that solder's not going to be a problem. Could have soldered them on the top side actually, looking at that. Anyway, let's try get the CPU in there. That's it. I'm not sure if I've got the INT2 and the OVR around the right way. I don't think there's any issue there. It probably won't work if they're around the wrong way. Anyway, let's give it a try. So the next thing to do is switch that off, connect up a compact flash adapter. Now for me personally, this is where things get a bit messy, because this one, as you can see, needs power. I can just pull a cable from the floppy drive over to this, I think, to power it. Having said that, it's a question of will it reach, and I think the answer is no, actually. Yeah, if you look at this cable, that's not long enough. Oh, I seriously hate things like this. It's like, why does everything have to get complicated? So the good news is it does work. You can see I've connected up this way here. I tried it on the 3.3 volt setting there, because a lot of these compact flash cards are 3.3 volt devices that are being passed off as 5 volt, but it didn't work, and that was the issue. As soon as I switched it back to the 5 volt position and powered it here this way, you'll see, if I switch the power on now, if you watch the LED down here, I'll just give it a second or two. In fact, it's not booting now, is it? So I've switched it on, just watch the LED, and strangely enough it's now not booting again, and it's giving me a yellow screen. I think the issue here is it doesn't like the RAM board below. I think that is what the issue is. Let's try that again. Yeah, when it's warmed up it's okay with the RAM board, but actually most of the time this is what it'll do, it'll just do nothing. So switch it off. Let's just remove this from the Gotta Go fast RAM board below. and then we'll remove Liv's board here. It doesn't need a jumper, this one. He's got a new firmware for the Gotta Go Fast RAM board now that doesn't need the config in pin. It's intelligent. There we go, no bent pins. Let's put that out of the way onto the USB pad up here and get it back in down here. I have to admit, they're quite fiddly to get in and out, these, but the socket, as I said, is pretty crap on this, so we should go in, switch it on, and if you watch the LED this time, there we go, flash, and believe it or not, it is actually booting. It stays like that for ages, flashing off and on. Yeah, I can see it flashing. Check the floppy drive, then it'll start flashing again. Yep. And it takes a good, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes to boot. It's incredible, but that's with this particular compact flash card. It's got lots of drives on it and stuff. It nevertheless does take a long time, and it's because it's PIO mode, and the CPU on these is running at 7 point something, I can never remember the exact amount, 7 point something megahertz, so it's not very fast. And PIO mode, you know, programmed IO, the CPU is doing all of the reading and writing to the IDE interface there, and that's what makes it slow. You know, if you have a 50 megahertz 030, that 50 megahertz clock speed with the efficiencies of an 030 as well means the interaction in that same way there is obviously an awful lot quicker. Ideally, you want something that's you know, got DMA capability, so that it doesn't tie up the CPU. But that, trust me, that is still booting. I think once we get to the desktop, I'll try and do a benchmark on that drive actually, just to see how bad the performance is. We're almost there. Still almost there. Oh, good grief. This reminds me of when I got a hard disk interface for my 500 Plus, actually, when I had one back in the day. I got an MFM interface, Kumana, I think it was, made a little board that plugged into the you know, expansion slot, the RAM expansion slot, and it gave you an MFM/RLL interface. I forget which it was, it might have been RLL. You know, the technicality is the same, it's just about compression. RLL is more efficient, you get more space on the drive, but is it ST506, I think it is? But anyway, that interface, you can see it's still booting, had an additional 1.5 meg of RAM as well. So it took my, you know, 1 meg, a 500 Plus, up to 2.5 meg. I forget exactly how the RAM was distributed, it was something like half a meg a chip, 1 meg of other, I think that's how it worked. But that took ages, just like this does here. Perhaps not quite as long actually, because I only had the 1 or 2 volumes, you know, there's quite a few different petitions on here. There we go, just about booted. I would say that was about between 3 and 4 minutes. Look how much memory we've got left, 74k. This is the problem, and this is a 2 meg A500 Plus, by the way. It's got a 1 meg expansion board. So yeah, this is the thing, you need to add lots of RAM when you use an IDE as well. And this kind of would push this out of, you know, realms of use. You know, you couldn't use this compact flash card. I cannot use this as things stand. I need to add some additional fast RAM. We may not even be able to load the benchmark. Let's try. There might not be sufficient RAM there. If we've got 79k, I can't imagine there's going to be enough RAM. Right, let's close these windows. That might free some RAM up. Of course, we could just boot without a startup script and go in that way. That might give us some more RAM. It's not freed any memory there, is it? Let's do clear RAM. RAM disk is full. Cancel. Yeah, it needs to use the RAM disk to do that, and it can't. Oh my god, we had 2k free there then. Let's just try sysinfo. Not enough memory to run sysinfo. Oh joy. So it's working with the Liv 2 board now, and it is booting. As I say, it could be because it's now warmed up. It could also be that the socket is not very good. That might be why it wasn't working before. It might not be anything to do with it having to warm up before, you know, it works. Hang on, no, that has rebooted. It's caused a crash, that, I think, because I saw the power light flash as if it's like cycling the power there. So we'll see if I can get that to boot up. So it does seem to need to warm up with to get the Liv 2 board working alongside it. Yeah, it's gone again. It's reset again. It's still booting here. This is about the 5th time. A couple of times the power light has cycled here. You know, it's flashed off and on to indicate a fault code, and then you can see the machine has reset and it starts over again. Once or twice I've had a guru and I have to left click and then it reboots and it starts again. So I think we're on attempt number 5 here, but I think this is booting now. It's got a lot further than the previous 4 attempts. But that does tie into my point about I think this needs to warm up. When it's warmed up, everything seems to work quite well with those 2 boards together, but when it's cold it doesn't. So there we go, we've got our additional 8 meg, and you can see, you know, 1.5 meg of it has been used there just from booting up, which means we haven't dipped into the chip RAM. We've still got 2 meg of chip RAM, so that would now be totally usable as a WHD load cell. So let's try do what we're going to do, which is to just benchmark the drive, the IDE. It's a lot quicker now as well, now we've got that fast RAM. So it's taking quite a while to load. There we go. Yeah, it's definitely going to be slow. I mean, look at that. That's not even showing the stuff at the top. Look, so slow. That took ages. Really makes me appreciate the 020 and the 030 onwards. Let's just have a look at memory. Yeah, 8 meg fast kick DMA and 2 meg chip. So we've got 10 meg this way. We're going to drives. I click that. I don't know what I did. Let's try it again. Drives. There we go. DH0. And we'll do speed. You can see it hitting the drive now. The LED's on. I'll be surprised if it's more than a few hundred K. Maybe 50 or 100K. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Wow, that's taking ages. It's not even lighting now. Has that crashed? No, I'm really struggling to get this to boot. It's flashing the ID at the moment. I'm showing you the power light because any minute I'm sure that will start flashing again, because that is what keeps happening with this. It's gone again. You can see that there. So it checks the floppy. Now it's looking at the IDE. Hang on. Now it's looking at the floppy. It's looking at the IDE. Flashing. So yeah, it's struggling to boot with that RAM board there. It's a shame really, because it's like I say, unless you've got a really basic drive, it makes something like this, you know, IDE 68K a little bit pointless to a degree. About 10 boot loops later, we have got back to the desktop again. So trying everything I possibly can here to get something to run. Sysinfo just will not work, even without the gotta go fast RAM board. You know, when you run the drive speed test, it flashes the IDE LED for about 8 or 9 seconds and then it stops and just doesn't do anything. It doesn't crash, it just sits there. The mouse still works, doesn't do anything, which makes me think it's an incompatibility. I don't know. So in order to add some more RAM to try and get something to run on this, a game maybe, I've connected up the A590 here. Yeah, you can see it was booting from there for a bit. Now it's reading the drives on there. So I think we've booted from this, but I think we should have both things running here with the 2 meg that this provides, which hopefully is enough to give you know, some RAM for a game to load from WHD load. It's a shame Commodore didn't design the A590 to accommodate 8 meg. You know, and having time to think about this, I think the best thing to do, rather than buy or build an IDE 68K, you're better off building the one that comprises of the 8 meg RAM as well. It's like an all-in-one. It comprises of 8 meg and IDE. That is the best board to build, I think. Because if you wanted to add IDE like this to a 500, as I say, there's many other ways to do it. Something like a TF536 is a better solution, I think. And in fact, if you just look at, you know, what I showed you a minute ago, the A590 there with SCSI, you're better off just doing that, I think. Alright, it's going to be a huge difference in cost there. It's still incredibly slow, this though. When you just boot from SCSI, it's nowhere near this slow. The IDE drive's really slowing the system down here. And of course, if you wanted to do a similar thing to an A2000, you really can't go wrong with something like a Buddha IDE board. That's the easiest thing on an A2000. So yeah, we might have some issues with drives here because they're going to overlap. You know, I've got a load of two ZH0s, two DH1s, two DH2s. I'm not sure. It seems to be allowing it to coexist here. It's giving them an icon look. See how much RAM we've got. 51K! Alright, we've still got our chip RAM, but this is because now we've got twice as many drives. I could remove the SCSI drive. I might try that next. Anyway, let's try a game again. Let's try loading June. And I'm going to load it from the IDE because I want to see what the IDE performance is like. We can't benchmark it. Maybe we can just load a game and see how it plays out. Oh, and it's crashed again. See, this is so there's some incompatibility going on here. It's flaky. I suspect it's going to be the length of that IDE cable, actually. You know, it's not any more stable now without the Gotta Go Faster on board. So, attempt, goodness knows what. I have lost count. So, this time we're trying it here without this small cable, because this could be the problem. You know, it starts to work, doesn't it? It's like it seems to be booting and stuff, then you get into Workbench, you go into a folder or two, and more often than not it says Workbench has stopped responding. Now, the interesting thing is that, you know, if I disconnect the drive here, leave this still connected, and just boot from the SCSI, SCSI works. I can navigate all the folders on there, just loaded June, it works fine. So it is just about this, you know, IDE device being a bit flaky. I suspect now we've put it there, it's not got that cable, it might be a little bit more robust. But of course, in terms of practicalities, how could you install it that way in an A500? It's impossible. What you would have to do is take an adapter like this, because obviously, you know, it needs to go out at an angle, and trim this right down here and recrimp this fit in here, right over here, so it's only, I don't know, an inch long or something. We're nearly there, it's still booting. Just something else I just thought of is a Discon module. You can get an IDE Discon module. Those are like really compact in the design, and provided the connector is, you know, on the board the right way, you could have a board flat plugged on top of that, and that might work. But of course, will it fit under your keyboard? I'm not sure. I mean, in mine here, I've got this here, it wouldn't fit inside an A500 with that on there anyway. So here we are again at the Workbench, 200k free out of our 2 meg fast RAM. 500A, 600, oh look, it's crashed again. So I spent the whole day yesterday messing with this darn thing, and right up into the late evening last night actually, and I worked out what was going on. There's a fault on this PCB. It's not something I've done, I'll show you in a minute. And when I say fault, I mean like a manufacturing defect. There are actually two on there. One of them is visible, and I checked that very early on actually after I'd seen it. So it's not that one. But you'll see now, this boots, and it boots very, very quickly, well, comparatively. So yeah, it's quite slow, but I would say it's exponentially faster than it was, like 20 times faster than it was. Instead of sat here waiting for roughly 4 minutes, I would say, you'll see, look at that. So that did take longer than it does say with 4000 or with a TF530 running at, you know, or a 536 running at 50 megahertz, you know, so it's way slower. It's about right for the speed of the processor, and I can sort of show you that actually. We can now do sysinfo. That wasn't working before when you did the IDE speed test. So you'll see it is not rocket speed or anything like that, but it's proportional. It's coming back with what you kind of expect for the speed of the CPU. Bear in mind it's, you know, it's PIO, which is around 600k. It was a bit higher than that yesterday. We'll do that speed test again. It's, you know, 557 there, just over half a meg. That's about right though. That's about right. You know, you're limited from the, you know, the clock speed of the processor here. Did that just come back with the same results again? I think it did, didn't it? Oh, it did. There you go, 613. So it's a little bit higher, about 600k. But that's not bad. That's not bad. Certainly compared to as it was. You know, you'd load this up, and the libraries and things up here, or the things in the top left there would be a pause of about 6 or 7 seconds before it was displayed. That's how slow it was. But yeah, it's responsive, and I can load games and things now. If I go and find something on the card here. In fact, let's just load Time Gal. I know you've seen it a million times before, but the thing with this, obviously, it streams consistently. You know, you've got a lot of data for all of the FMV to get spilled off the, you know, your disk, effectively. So if you've got a too slow throughput, it will be evidenced here, because you'll get it breaking up. And you can hear it's perfect, absolutely perfect. And you can see it accessing the disk there, look. And this is the thing, it'll be obvious. See this wire here? It was the INT2 connection. The INT2 connection comes out on the top of the PCB up here. It's not connected to the CPLD. Now it just so happens there's another pad down here for INT2, and that one is joined. Now, the two guys that have been working on this, building them themselves and testing it themselves, one of them is Live2, Matt, and Sparks UK on my Discord, and both those guys said they've checked theirs and theirs is okay. In fact, I think Live2 said one of his is not right, actually. So yeah, it's a board defect. So you can see OVR is the bottom pin and int2 is the top one. Both of those are active low signals. So int2, this is the interrupt 2 signal that comes from one of the CAAs. On a 500 it's the left hand CAA, and I think it's the left hand pin in that direction, I think, on the corner of the board. And I tested connectivity from there to there, and we had a short, so I knew there was nothing wrong there. I thought, well, maybe it's the CIA, but I did various tests on that machine, including running a diagram, and everything seemed to check out okay. So I thought, well, it must be something on this board related to interrupt 2. And why did I think that? Well, I spoke to Sparks UK and I was telling him it's taking like 4 minutes to boot, and he said, no, that's not right, it just shouldn't take that long. And I was like, well, maybe it's this compact flash card. I've got an 8 gig card and it's, I don't know, it's formatted in a weird way. Maybe it's, it's a slow card. Maybe that's what it is. But something was niggling in my mind as well, thinking about int2. I started thinking about the consequences, and remembered something about the Terrible Fire series. I think that some of those use int2. I think I've built a TF530 in the past and had issues with int2. If that's not connected, it will run really slow. Because this thinks it's kind of having to wait all the time. I think you've not got the correct time in there. It doesn't see the window of opportunity when it's supposed to do stuff. At least I think that's what's going on. So I did a connectivity test between the pin here and this chip, and there was no connectivity, and I tested it 3 or 4 times. I couldn't find a connection, so straight away I was like, I think I found it. I think I found the issue. So I followed it, and it goes via somewhere up here or something, then it goes through and it goes all the way somewhere else through another via, and it comes up underneath here. So at that point I'm like, well, I've got no chance of trying to work out where that's going. So I looked at the schematics, and as you can see them here, and here's the int and OVR pins. Yeah, it just says it in OVR, it doesn't show where they go. And if you look at the CPLD pin out here, it's not actually the chip, it's just like a list of all the pins with the assignments. And if we go down all the way down here, you'll see, where's it gone now? It's like pin 35 or something. Yeah, there it is, int2 on pin 35. Now, since then, Live2 made me aware there's another int2. Can you see here? S2, N int2, pin 8. What actually goes on is this one here goes to pin 8, yeah, which is somewhere down here, because pin 1's in this bottom left, or somewhere here. That's where int2 should go, and I'm going to put a wire there in a minute to fix that issue. And then the other one goes to 35, which is somewhere up here, I think, and the pad, for that is there, and attached to another jumper there to get it working. And both of those are fired at the same time. There's no difference in logic there. So it's almost like they've got 2 ways of generating that. Now, on first inspection, you could think, that's a bit weird, why would you do that? But it's quite a clever idea. If you've got a spare pin, if one of these fails, let's say you short it to 5 volts or ground or something, you kill the actual I/O pin on here, the other one should still work, as long as the internal, macro cell logic has not died or whatever. If it's just the I/O pin, you've got a second chance, so that's quite a clever idea. I don't know if they did the same thing with OVR, but nevertheless, there are 2 pins there. And obviously these are easier for me because my wires come out of that part of the board there. It's just more consistent stuff to have it that way around. Well, that was incredibly hard. Can you see I've got like a hair thick wire here just coming down there. Yeah, it was hard to join it to that pin there, but yeah, I managed it, got it first time. So I just need to clean that up in a sec, but I'm going to go test it now just to make sure that does work. Woohoo, that fixed it. No worries at all. Super quick booting. So let's have a clean around this now. We need to just finish cleaning with cotton buds first, because there's the odd cap and LED and stuff like that there that I fitted where I never cleaned around it with cotton buds, and then we'll get the toothbrush on there. You can see the flux coming off that. So I spent a little bit of time just going up and down those carefully. Let's just now try gently cleaning with that toothbrush. So it was proving incredibly difficult to try and solder it on down there, so I've literally just joined it up over here. If I ever have a fault, you know, in that pin, I can always just join it to pin 8 there, but you know what, it's just not worth it. The thin wire I had would break off. This one's a bit more sturdy, it's not going to break off. Yeah, it's in between the pins there, but that'll be fine. You know, they stand off quite a way when they go into the 8 meg RAM board below. And that's the other nice thing with this now, that it works alongside Live 2's Gotta Go Fast RAM board, which means, you know, you stick this in my 500 and I'm going to have IDE and 8 meg. Really nice. So I've been playing on this for a few hours now, everything is working fine. I don't know whether the quit key will work, let's try it. Yeah, it works on some games, not on others. Sometimes it will crash the system. And I think it's because you need an MMU to use a quick key within WHD load. You could upgrade the 68000 to the next chip up, I forget what it is now. 68010, isn't it? Got one of those somewhere. It's great being able to use the Live 2 Gotta Go Fast RAM board with this as well. You know, that 8 meg, it really makes a device like this, as I showed towards the start of the video there, just after I first built it. If you've not got that extra 8 meg of fast RAM, you end up with next to no memory free. It's surprising actually how much memory we've got there, despite the number of drives and things, but this is a more basic install of Workbench 3.1. It's just a vanilla Workbench 3.1. Skip that. I saw this game recently on Mainmeister's channel actually, and he was moaning about the 16-bit versions not having a cursor. But you know what? It makes it more true towards the arcade, because you've got to use, not guesswork, you've got to predict where the cursor is based on how much you move the mouse. And you know what? You can get pretty good at it, as you can see. Alright, I had a few misses there, but generally it's not that hard. And then when you do get the laser dot, the red dot, it makes sense, because that's the thing, that was one of the power-ups in the arcade, so you could see where you're aiming. So just wrapping up here now, I'll just disconnect the IDE here, we'll pull it off there, I think. Yeah, you do have to be careful disconnecting this, because this whole thing here, this Tower of Insanity, as I've been calling it, it doesn't stay very well attached. You know, like the CPU, I'll just show you, you can probably lift this, look, I can lift this out without any, you know, prizing and stuff, which goes to show it's not a very tight fit. It's a bit better with these two boards, they sandwich pretty well, so you do need to use something to separate these from each other. Just a little bit of leverage like that on each side. It isn't the easiest thing to separate when you've got a tower of upgrades like this, but anyway, I'm very pleased these seem to coexist. I'm using this because it's got round edges as well, less chance of damaging something, but when you have to prise them apart like this, you could easily damage something. Because you see you've got small components and things here, it would be very easy to damage it. So yeah, Gotta Go Fast RAM board has got to go on the bottom, otherwise this sulks, it becomes unstable and stuff, but with that on the bottom, they're rock solid. The two work together really, really well. There was another defect I was going to show you on here, I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to see it. I'm not sure actually whether I can see it now. Oh, it's here. Yeah, let me just put you on macro. Right, you're on super macro, and you should be able to see the defect there. If I just roll the light off that, can you see there's like a lump in the middle of the board just next to the wire there, and it's where this little trace comes up and goes up there, and the copper has exposed. I haven't scratched that myself, that's how it came shipped to me. So yeah, there are little imperfections on some of these boards. I'd be interested to know where you got these manufactured actually. And obviously there is a defect under here, which is why I've had to put this wire. That wire should go to pin 8 down here, but yeah, you can see it looks a bit silvery on the top there where I did originally solder it on. I just can't be bothered trying to solder it back on there. It's far easier for me and lazy for me to just connect it up there to the second point, because there are two ways that can get driven, as I explained earlier. So the pins, yeah, really nice. You saw how easy those are to put on, they're not difficult at all. I think when I've seen these assembled by the people, they've soldered them on this side up here, But you can see I haven't done that. But some of the solder does leak through the hole, the wire, through to this side. The 9th one down here is your OVR, and the 10th one down is INT2. There are some little wires there. You can see, if you look at these ones down here, there's little wires that lead to them. So I soldered on there. This one broke off, which is why there's quite a large blob of solder, because I resoldered it back on. I will show them that again later. I think what I did is unblocked the wire and fed it through. You can see that's not sat on there at the moment, so we'll just carefully get that back into position. Yeah, while I was doing that there, I just noticed that this was sat on there the wrong way. It wasn't plugged in, it was just literally sat on top, ready to be reconnected. So yeah, it goes that way around. And as I said, black wire has OVR, it's marked on the PCB there. And the yellow is INT2. And incidentally, INT2 is connected to that pin there on that CIA. So if you had a problem with INT2 and it wasn't on your board, that would be the next thing in question. But I think your system would not work properly if that pin was not working. So the one thing that's worth pointing out about this, you can see this Tower of Insanity here. It's quite high. It is quite high. The keyboard sort of comes up here, so this may be a problem if you've got a RAM board under there, or like I am at the moment with this. I'm not sure this would go into a cased 500. Could be quite difficult. You could of course use one of those relocators, to bring the CPU up here to get around that problem. I'm just not sure how reliable that would be. I could give it a try actually, because I've got one of those. Let's give that a go. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to solve the problem. You can see it's way too high there. The other problem, and this is just related to this stupidly designed thing here, it might be alright with other revisions of the 500, but look, I can't get the chip in. I think if the chip was in first and it was just a mask ROM or an EEPROM, it would fit okay there. But when you've got a towering thing like that, it's not going to fit. If I took off the socket off the bottom, it may fit. I don't need that socket with this, actually, turn pin into turn pin. We could try that. I'll just see if it'll squeeze in there, but yeah, I'm not holding out for it. Yeah, so turn pin into turn pin socket. Let's try that. Yeah, you can see the PCB's catching there. With a mask ROM, that might be okay. So, yeah, very annoying that nobody thought, about this here, just maybe increased the height of this here just to get that corner shaved off a little bit. As you can see here, I've got it in the Rev 4 A2000 board. I'm using this CPU slot thing here just because I fitted a couple of pins on it for INT2 and OVR. It just means they're easy to join up rather than having to join extra fly leads on the board like we did for the config in pin there, that blue wire. And as you can see, it works fine. The benchmarks there on the disc is just a little bit slower, 562. I did it a couple of times then, it's around 561, 562. So it's subtly faster on the 500 Plus. So yeah, very pleased. The IDE 68K will work on a 2000 as well. Obviously, your mileage is going to vary. It depends on what other things you've got in there. Just out of interest, I think what I might do is test it with the TF536. You've not seen that yet. That'll be another video. But we'll just plug that in, remove the CPU, maybe remove the IDE from one or the other, because obviously the TF536 provides IDE. The IDE might clash, that might be the issue. Yeah, and I think it's to be expected, and hopefully it hasn't damaged anything by doing this, because you've got two IDE interfaces now, and they're probably both trying to replicate Gale functionality. They might be sat in the same sort of, well, yeah, they will be. If they're Gale, they're going to be sat at the same address, aren't they? They're using the same registers and things, so yeah, and independently they both work fine, so neither of them were damaged by that little endeavour there. So thanks again to Sparks UK. It was very much appreciated sending me the components and the PCB to build this. I have enjoyed building it. Thanks to Liv2 for helping out. If you've not seen the video for this, I'll post a link up there to that. And below in the description, I'll post links to the page for this board where you can get the PCB layouts and the JEDEC and stuff to program one of these up. And there's lots of information on there to get different revisions of this board working within different Amiga models. Anyway, I do hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel, please see the Ko-fi and Patreon links down below. I'll catch you in the next video.